Hello, and thanks for joining. Today I'm going to talk about the pre-session, and if you're a medical interpreter, then hopefully you already know what a pre-session is. If you're a court interpreter, you may not have heard of it before, or if you work in other sorts of interpretation. And I think that that's a shame. I actually think that the pre-session is really important. It's really great for the interpreter to be able to connect for just a few moments in an impartial, unbiased way with the people who will be using their services in order to set the ground rules for how it's supposed to work. Because let's face it, interpreting is a little bit weird. Somebody's going to be speaking as though they were somebody else. And whenever you see interpreting in the movies or on television, it's not the way that it actually works. It's always reported speech. Oh, well, he says blah, blah, blah. And there's paraphrasing, and there's advocacy, and there's things that normally under regular conditions do not occur in an interpreting assignment. So it's really important for you to be on the same page with your clients and for them to know how to help you have your job done easier. Now, you have to look at it from two perspectives. You're going to have the things that you want to communicate, but then you also have to see how you can meet the person so that they can hear what you have to say. It's not enough to just say the things. They have to actually hear them. So, in a pre-session, there's usually 4 things that we're told to say. The SIFEs or the SIFs or CIFEs, which are confidentiality, I speak in the first person, flow control, and everything will be interpreted. Now, the first and the last, fine, but I take issue with the middle two because they mean nothing to the average person. If you say, I will speak in the first person, they're going to have to figure out in their heads what that means, and you don't want to make them work to understand. So I prefer to say something like, I will speak as though I were you. You can speak directly to the doctor. Or I will speak as if I were you. You can speak directly to the patient. Okay? You can even throw in something like, it'll make things go much smoother if you speak to each other, and I'll just speak as though I were you. Right? So that's much more explanatory than I speak in the first person. Flow control, again, nobody knows what that means. Barely the interpreters know what that means. What it means is that every now and then you may raise your hand to pause them, or you may ask for a repetition, and that's all part of you managing the flow of the dialogue. Okay? But you're not going to use a fancy term of art, like flow management, to describe that. You're going to use basic language that the doctor and the patient can understand. So you have to think about your pre-session as an elevator pitch where you have very little time to establish the guidelines of an interpreter-facilitated conversation. And it's your moment to set those ground rules so that later if somebody slips and they say, tell her this, or don't interpret that, then you can say, oh, as I said earlier, speaking as the interpreter, everything will be interpreted. And actually you can speak directly to the patient, right? You already said it. So now they know, now it's on them that actually they slipped up, which is fine. It's not about fault or anything like that, but they were warned, they knew. So when you remind them, you're not a jerk. You're just telling them what they need to know so you can do your job properly. So a pre-session is what happens at the beginning of a medical interpretation assignment. It'll also happen in other parts of community interpreting, so you can do this when you're an educational interpreter or you're interpreting in church or anything that falls under the auspices of community interpreting. And you say the same exact thing to your clients in English and your clients in your other language. And you take control because they're not going to necessarily expect you to do that pre-session. So you really have to go in there like, hi, I'm Athena, I'm your interpreter, and I'm just going to introduce myself. I'll be interpreting that everything that is said. It'll remain confidential. If I need you to pause, I'll just ask you to pause. And if you could just speak directly to the other person, that'll make things go a lot more smoothly. I'll interpret as though I were you. Just a moment, I'm going to say all that to the other party. Hola, mi nombre es Athena y blah, 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 blah. Okay? But you take control. You get in there, you say what you have to say it quickly, you say it with expression, you make eye contact, and you say it in a way that will be properly received. Then you tell them that you're going to say it in the other language, and you go for it. You don't have a lot of time, especially in a medical setting. The doctors are going to want to cut you off right away and start the session. What they don't understand is that if you give a good pre-session, the session will actually be more efficient. It'll go quicker, and they'll be able to get to their next assignment okay. So it's win-win for everyone, but you really need to rehearse it and then make it feel natural when you do it live. So some things to include are confidentiality, a mention of speaking directly to each other, a mention of a hand signal you might use if you're going to pause them, and telling them that everything will be interpreted. And one final thing you might want to mention is that if you're going to be taking notes, that they will be kept confidential and destroyed after the appointment. You never know what kind of people you're going to be meeting in an interpreting assignment, and some people have a lot of trauma, especially related to people taking notes about them, depending on where they come from and what the political situation might be. So you don't want them freaking out that you're taking notes. So you just say the notes are to help the interpreter's memory, and they will be destroyed after the assignment. You can even do it in front of them if you think that will alleviate any concerns. And that's the pre-session. Thanks for joining.